Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about a very important issue. It's a fundamental constitutional issue for this body and part of our duties in the Senate, in the Congress, and that is to ensure next week the funding for the government expires at the end of the month. And with only 1 week until the current government funding runs out, it's our responsibility to work together and to make sure that the government keeps running, that we don't disrupt people's lives, that we don't end up spending more money because we shut the government down to reopen it, and that we provide the certainty with all of the challenges we face at home and, of course, the threats we face abroad. An issue that has come up that is a very important issue, and that is an organization called Planned Parenthood, and holding Planned Parenthood accountable in the wake of deeply disturbing videos that discuss the appalling practice of harvesting the organs and body parts of unborn babies. Like Americans across all political spectrums, I was just sick to see the content of recent videos that have been disclosed that show a callous disregard by officials at Planned Parenthood for the dignity of human life. These videos have shocked the conscience of people across our country because this organization does receive taxpayer funding. I understand why we have had an important debate in this body about redirecting this funding because of Planned Parenthood's actions and fully investigating what was revealed in those disturbing videos that showed the practice of the harvesting of organs and body parts of unborn babies. So I support the efforts of the Judiciary Committee to investigate these disturbing videos. And I also don't believe that it's appropriate that taxpayer funds should be used to fund a private organization that performs hundreds of thousands of abortions each year and that engages in the horrific practices that were shown in these videos. That's why last month I joined a bipartisan majority of senators in voting to redirect federal funding from Planned Parenthood to community health centers that provide women's health services, including mammograms, cancer screenings, and contraceptives. In New Hampshire, there are more than 30 community health centers compared to 5 Planned Parenthood clinics. But when we had this debate and vote on the Senate floor, we only received 53 votes in favor of redirecting this money from Planned Parenthood to community health centers to provide women's health services, falling well short of the 60-vote threshold required to advance this legislation in the Senate. Yet despite already having a vote on this that failed the 60-vote threshold of the United States Senate, there are some that are pushing to attach this issue to the funding of the government. Even though when we had the vote here, we didn't have the votes to get it passed in the United States Senate, and even though the president himself has explicitly said that he would veto any bill that prohibits funding from Planned Parenthood or redirects that funding to community health centers. In fact, the president is so dug in on funding for Planned Parenthood that he's prepared to let the government shut down over it. And those who are pushing this strategy, saying we should go forward with it anyway, they've not explained how we would obtain 67 votes in the United States Senate. When we had the vote on it, we only received 53 votes, not even enough to advance the legislation in the United States Senate, which requires 60. The president certainly knows that we don't have 67 votes in the Senate to override his veto. Those who are pushing the strategy, nevertheless, to attach this to the government funding bill, this issue of redirecting the funding, also know that there aren't 60 votes in the Senate, never mind 67 to override a presidential veto. So the result is here that if we pass the bill, even if we could get to the 60 votes, the president is sure to veto it, and the 67 votes aren't there to override his veto. And in the end, we are heading toward an imminent government shutdown if this is not resolved. And everyone who looks at this issue knows what the reality is of where the votes lie. In fact, those on my side of the aisle who have been pushing the strategy of pass the bill, send it to the president for his veto, I've asked them the question, let's assume we could get the 60 votes to do that. First of all, how do we get those 60 votes? I haven't received an answer to that question. And then I've asked the next question, even if we could get those 60 votes to pass it out of the United States Senate and to send this to the president's desk with a government funding bill that redirects the money to Planned Parenthood over his opposition, and he vetoes it, where do the 67 votes come from? And I've not received an answer to that. So I'm here on the floor today to say, I'm tired of the political games. I'm tired of the president's game on this, that he's so dug in on this issue that he would be willing to let the government shut down. I'm tired of the people on my side of the aisle who are pushing this strategy even though they know they don't have the votes to have it pass the United States Senate, and they certainly don't have the votes to override a presidential veto. And so therefore they can't answer the question, what's the end game for success here, even if you feel as passionately about these issues as we all do. And so here we are again with both sides and the political posturing. And I don't want to play this game anymore. I think it's too important that we not relive the movie of where we were in 2013 when the government shut down, because I asked the very same question then when the issue was defunding Obamacare. I asked the question, how does this end? How does it end successfully to defund Obamacare? How does it end without shutting down the government? And I never received an answer then, and I haven't received an answer now from those who are pushing this strategy. And we saw the movie in 2013, and I don't think we should relive that movie. Let's remember what happened. When you shut the government down and you reopen it, it actually costs you more money. So if you care about the fiscal state of the country, let's not waste money shutting the government down with no result. You think about the economy and the disruption in people's lives. I remember my constituents calling me on the phone because I was answering my phones, and I remember people who saved for years for a family vacation to our national parks and could not participate in that family vacation and lost the money they had sunk into it for years in their family savings for their big family vacation because people were pushing to keep the government shut down, even though they had no strategy for achieving a result on it. And I remember the uncertainty and the hardship for working families, our military, even though we keep our national security piece open during a government shutdown, there's so much uncertainty about who that covers and who it doesn't. And when we look at the threats we're facing around the world right now, we do not need uncertainty when it comes to those who at home on the law enforcement end keep us safe, on our intel, on our military, and all the civilian workforce that supports them and makes sure they can do their job every single day. The bottom line is 2013, we didn't get a result. Funding for Obamacare continued. The government was shut down. It cost us more money, the disruption. And we never got an answer then for how that would end successfully. And here we find ourselves again, same group of people pushing same strategy, on the Planned Parenthood issue, saying we should shut the government down again, even though they cannot answer the question, how do we get to 60 votes? How do we get to 67 votes so that you can actually achieve a result here? And I think the answer is they don't know the answer, because we all know where the votes are, and it's not going to happen. So I'm here on the floor because I feel strongly that I agree with the national right to life on this. In a recent op-ed, the National Right to Life rightly points out that pursuing this shutdown strategy could actually undermine efforts to hold Planned Parenthood accountable, primarily by shifting public attention to the political blame game that would result inevitably from the shutdown. The National Right to Life also cited a study by the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service that found that the majority of federal funds flowing to Planned Parenthood would not even be temporarily interrupted if the government shut down, because the funds flow from mandatory spending programs like Medicaid rather than the congressional funding process, which is what is the discretionary spending piece, which is impacted by what we will vote on the continuing resolution. Again, this was the same issue that actually came up in 2013 when it came to the tactic of trying to defund Obamacare without a strategy for success. Right now, we're playing a game of chicken, and it's a dangerous game. We already know, as we stand here, where the votes are, what it takes to keep the government open, and yet, as I understand it, we're going to be taking another vote on Thursday so that we can show the proponents of those who are again seeking to attach the Planned Parenthood redirecting of funding issue to the government funding bill that, guess what, we already know the answer to. We don't have the votes. We're not going to get to 60 in the United States Senate. Never mind the 67 it would take to override a presidential veto. So we all know what it's going to take to keep the government open. And I think we should have that vote now instead of continuing to have the political show votes that show to people where we know the votes already are on this issue. And that means a clean funding bill now, so that we aren't wasting time, so that we aren't bringing ourselves closer to the brink of a shutdown. And so in good conscience, while I fully support redirecting the money from Planned Parenthood to community health centers to serve women, I cannot in good conscience participate again in this process, one that would ensure that we come closer to the brink of a shutdown when I've not heard a strategy for success. I think the American people are owed an answer to the question, what is your strategy of success if you are threatening to shut the government down? And I would ask the same of President Obama, if this is such an important issue to you that you're willing also to participate in this exercise of threatening a shutdown. Is this that important to you when the money can be redirected to community health centers that provide services to women? That said, it's time to quit the games on both sides of the aisle. I came here to solve problems, and that means we need to address this issue now. We should have the vote on the clean funding bill now. We should make sure that we keep the government running, given the challenges that we're facing at home and abroad, so that we do not have shutdown 2 and relive the movie that we did in 2013 that was not a good one for the country. So I hope that we will take the vote right now instead of continuing to play political games on both sides of the aisle while the clock ticks down. This is a very important issue for our country, and I'm prepared right now to vote with a bill that'll keep the government funded. With that, Mr. President, I thank you, and I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.